Hi, Aaron.
I'm the first one here.
You are the first one here. And there's also someone, I see another. Did you have another DDOT representative joining with you?
Yeah, hopefully we should have a couple of people. I think Cyrus should be joining us and possibly George Brannion.
Okay, great. Thank you. I am in the process of getting this to stream on Facebook. So just give me 1 second and I'll be
Sure.
paying attention. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Kent and Jason, and we should be
Aaron.
live.
Hey, Aaron.
So just to go over, I'd love to do quick introductions at the beginning of this evening, and then Aaron, hand it off to you. Do you have slides to screen share? I mean, you should be able, okay, good. I was gonna say, as panelists, you should be able to screen share. And then I do know we'd love to have Commissioner Bass share a bit about the work that I know he's done, and to the point of where, or Aaron, I'm not sure how far you've dug into the notes that I know Kent sent, but hopefully discussing that in more detail too.
Yeah, I've reviewed those. So just real quick before we get going here, that sort of the way, and first of all, let me just say that I'm sorry that the communication for me has been a little bit lacking. I ended up working the election as a ballot clerk, and it really took a bite out of my capacity for a straight week. So my apologies. If I'd thought about this more, I would have asked that we push this back to December. But we're here, and I'm excited to do this. I'm really excited about this project. What I've got prepared this evening is a brief sort of introduction to DDOT and myself and this project in general, a little bit of history, and then I've got the concept drawings to review, the same ones from 2018. Because we have some flexibility here at the very beginning to really drill down on what the scope of this project is going to be in terms of geography and in terms of actual project elements. I mean, the bike lanes are pretty non-negotiable. Like that's the core of what DDOT is interested in doing here. But exactly where, like how far they go and the other elements are pretty open for discussion. So that's really what I'm interested in getting out of this evening. And I imagine we're going to need to do a follow-up meeting because probably I'm going to be asked questions that I'm not going to be able to answer. I'm going to have to go back to the engineering team.
Well, and let me ask you one question that if I'd had enough presence of mind, I would have asked you a couple weeks ago. To your point, we did have a community meeting on November 7th, 2018, with a lot of feedback from the community. What happened to all of that feedback?
That's a good question. I'm guessing Mike Goodnow has it, so I will.
Because I don't really want us starting over, and in a way, I will just say I was a little disappointed to see that we're going to be using the same drawings that we used 2 years ago, if no one has shared the notes from that meeting with you. So I'll just throw that out. Because again, I don't really want you redoing work that's already been done.
Yeah, I mean, me neither.
So.
Well, I was expecting Commissioner Brown to be here as well. And I know we have a guest, Jay Neville, logged in. I was just planning on promoting commissioners to panelists, but if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat, here, I'll promote to panelists right now. Great. Nick. Great. We definitely have more people joining right now. So I will just give general updates right now. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our special meeting this evening. I know twice in 1 week is sometimes a lot, so I appreciate the time that you're giving to this. I know throughout this process, commissioners on the eastern side of our commission boundaries have put in a lot of time and effort conducting outreach. Commissioner Bass putting in time going door-to-door surveying neighbors about the Crosstown project, and I'm so thankful for the time and effort you put into this. Aaron, I would love if you could just give a quick introduction to yourself in case folks haven't met you before. And then we'll just kick it off with your presentation, and then moving into Commissioner Bass, who it sounds like will be sharing some more information that may not be incorporated in the discussion slides tonight.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me. Thank you for taking time out of your evening for us to have this conversation. My name is Aaron Goldbeck. I am a planner at DDOT. I'm on the Sustainable Transportation team, which means actually I tend to not work on this kind of project. Actually, I tend to focus on programmatic things. So capital bike share, scooters, that kind of stuff is more my wheelhouse. But I was really excited I volunteered for this because I live relatively nearby. I just bought a place in Manor Park, a little north of Kennedy Street. I travel through this neighborhood all the time. I really care about it. So I was excited to work on this one. And this is sort of the first bike lane project that I've been in from pretty much the start of the actual design and implementation phase. So it's exciting for me. And yeah, that's who I am. And I know these are like my Call of Duty headphones. I assure you I'm focused on the Zoom.
Thank you so much. And then I know I've promoted commissioners to panelists, other folks, just to keep it organized. I will keep you on as attendees, and then when we have question and answer, I'll make sure everyone has the ability to share. So commissioners, if you would just give a word about who you are, as well as other DDOT or district government representatives.
With whom would you like to start?
You may go first, please.
Sure, since I don't like dead air. Hello, everyone. I'm Kent Bass, Chair of ANC 1A, and I'm also the Commissioner for Single Member District 1A08, which is the northern third of Parkview. So the bike lane project, if you live north of Park Road, and south of Rock Creek Church. On Park Place, that's my single member district, and I will also say on Warder, with the exception of the section of Warder between Park Road and the school, I share with Commissioner Ray. See, that was me handing it off to you.
Yes, I assume. I was just making sure I wasn't on mute before I started. Hi, everyone. This is Commissioner Ray, 1A09. And so I represent the area of basically Warder Street on the west side. But then I'm on the other side of Georgia Avenue between Sherman and Warder Street. So good evening.
And Commissioner Clock, are you able to introduce?
Sure. Sorry, my internet's not very good. I'm at 13th and 16th Street. I am let's see, in the southwest corner of our commission. I'm an avid cyclist myself, so I do like alternative modes of transportation. So we're happy to have a connected network of bike lanes coming. Thank you.
And then I know we have a few other district government folks who are on the call. So we'll start with Councilmember Nadeau's representative.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Bobak. We also have David on the line from our legislative team. I'm the constituent services coordinator for Councilmember Nadeau's office, and specifically for ANC 1A. I also, like your commissioners, live about 3 blocks from the bike lane on Park in Georgia. So excited to hear. And just wanted to say thank you in advance to our DDOT representatives who've taken the time to be here today and respond to all the questions that constituents have.
And I know I just promoted Commissioner Brown. Yeah, thank you.
You're on mute, Commissioner.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rashida Brown, Commissioner for the 1A10 Single Member District. And I have the 400 block of Kenyon Street Northwest that has the protected bike lanes installed.
And then I know folks, George Brannion, we just promoted you to a panelist as well, along with Syra and Cynthia as well.
Great, yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm George Brannion. I am the manager of the active transportation team at DDOT. We design and plan, design, and install many of the cycle tracks and the projects in the district. So good to be here. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Syra Molina. Sorry, my background's a little bit weird. I am here from DDOT. I am in the community engagement team. I also live in Ward 1 too. Grew up in Ward 1. So this is definitely home for me.
Thank you, Syra. And Cynthia?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Tercios. I'm the Ward 1 liaison from the Mayor's Office of Community Relations, and happy to be with you all again twice in 1 week.
Thanks so much. And then if there is anyone else who I have missed that's attending in some sort of professional capacity, please flag it, type a note in the chat. I see we have Gordon Chafin acting as a reporter joining us tonight. And just so everyone knows, and David Meddy, and just so everyone knows, we are recording this and it's also being live streamed on Facebook for folks that may have had difficulty joining on Zoom.
I guess I'll just introduce myself really quick. Hey everyone, I'm David Meddy. Like Ali, I'm also with Ward 1 Councilmember Nadeau's office. I handle the transportation portfolio on her legislative staff. So I want to thank the ANC for putting this together. I know this has been an important priority for our office and a lot of folks in the community, especially as we look at implementing the whole of the Crosstown plan moving forward. So thank you all for being here.
Appreciate it. So we'll just, now that we have our introductions, we'll just hand it over to Aaron. If you wouldn't mind, you're free to screen share. And folks, if you have any issues, I know some people are still having issues with Zoom. When Aaron is presenting, your screen will probably jump into a full screen presentation. You can X out of that if you want to go back to the chat, which is still available. Or if you have any questions, of course, you can raise your hand as well.
Okay, so hopefully folks should be able to see my presentation slide, my first slide here. And for anybody who joined late, I'll just briefly reintroduce myself. My name is Aaron Goldbeck. I'm a planner at DDOT. I work on sustainable transportation and infrastructure projects. Very happy to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. Just on a personal note, this is a project I'm really excited about. And that's because I live nearby as well. I'm in the neighborhood just over the border in Ward 4, and I travel through here all the time. Some of you might have met me actually last week. I was a ballot clerk at the Emory Heights Community Center during early voting. So if anybody voted there, it's good to see you again. So what we're going to do this evening, what I wanted to do, let's see if I can get my slides to advance here. There we go. Just give you a little bit of an introduction as to, you know, who we are as DDOT and what we want to learn today. Give you a little bit of the background and the history of the project, of which there's a lot of history because we've been working on this for a long time. I want to tell you about what our process is going to be going forward and give you a sense of what the timeline is and give you a sense of when this is going to be done. And then I want to take sort of a deep dive into what we have in terms of a project concept. I've got drawings I'm going to share. We're going to walk through together. And then I'm really interested in having a discussion about all of the above because it's important for us to learn what the community's priorities are here for this project because we have some discretion on how we approach this. And I think that's kind of fun. So I'm not going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So, you know, I guess commissioners, if you want to, if there's anything you want to jump in with and any questions for me that you want to raise as we go, please do so.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. All right, so who we are? You know, I'm here from DDOT, which is the Department of Transportation. We're an executive branch agency. Our mission is to equitably deliver a safe, sustainable, and reliable multimodal transportation network for all residents and visitors of the District of Columbia. So when we mean safe, what we mean is that we want to be safe for all road users. We want to, whenever we do a project, we want to improve the safety for people walking, for people driving in their cars, and for anybody who's taking a bike or scooter or any of the other new kind of vehicles that we've got out there now. When we say sustainable, what we mean is that we want it to help to combat climate change. We want it to be economically sustainable as well. We want to make it cheaper as well as easier for people to move around the district. And when we say multimodal, again, that's just going back to this whole thing where there's a lot of different types of vehicles out there. There's cars, there's bikes, there's scooters now, there's mopeds, there's powered, you know, personal mobility devices, electric wheelchairs, all those things. And we are responsible for all that stuff. And then again, I'm Aaron, as I already said. So, you know, where is this project? The area that we're talking about? I threw a quick map on here. We're focusing on this corridor that sort of goes from Kenyon north to Grant Circle, and the particular streets that we're interested in improving are Park Place there on the east side, and then Warder Street Northwest. And we want to make some changes, I think, to Park Road as well. And how long is this going to take us? We think it's going to take about 1.5 years. We think we've got about a 16-month project timeline here. So that is to say, we hope to break ground on this project when the weather permits in early 2022, which sounds like a long time from now, but I think it'll be here hopefully before we know it. So there's a lot of history to this project. It's been underway for quite a while, but I wanted to give you the brief version why we're doing this. And the big reason why is that we've got a long-range plan called Move DC, and this sets DDOT's long-term goals, and I'm talking goals over years and decades. And this is really a shameless plug because we are in the process of updating this plan right now. So I want to take this moment to ask you to please give your feedback on the Move DC plan. It's very important because it leads to projects like this and the conversation we're having right now. So in the earlier iteration of Move DC, it called for a special study focused on this area, which was done in 2016. This study is the Crosstown Multimodal Transportation Study, and it took a while to do. But we're seeing some of the results of it already. The new protected bike lane on Irving, north of the hospital center, that extends onto Kenyon was a direct result of this. And that is because one of the things that DDOT learned doing the Crosstown multimodal study was that there was a great need for protected bike lanes in this area, both to make an east-west connection between Northeast DC and Northwest DC, and we've done that already. And now moving on to phase 2, the other need that we identified in that study was a better north-south connection to connect what we have just finished building, this Irving Street and Kenyon Street protected bike lane, and now we want to connect that to go north up to the Ground Circle area. So that brings us up to today. So what's going to happen next? What is the timeline? What's going to happen is first we're going to have some conversations, and there have already been conversations, but we think that feedback and stakeholder engagement is very important. So for the next couple of months, we are going to work on collecting additional feedback from the community on big picture things, little picture things, and we are going to really dial in the project scope and nail down exactly what it is that we are trying to build to improve these roads. In the spring, that design work will begin. It's going to be done by the DDOT engineering team. They hope to have something to share by the summer, where we can then dial in the fine details, the really small stuff, but the big picture is going to be locked in by then. We hope to have it completely done with every detail completed in the fall of next year. So around this time next year, we'll have a complete set of plans ready to go. And then as soon as weather permits, early 2022, we will start to build. That is the plan. All right. So I'm going to get into drawings in a moment and maps and all that good stuff and give you more of a visual sense of what it is we're dealing with here. But just, was there a question?
Yes, this is Commissioner Dottie Love Wade. And my question was, I know you said that you did the study in 2016. When was that study completed? Was it completed in 2016 or?
Yeah, it was completed in 2016.
So the study that you completed in 2016 is what you're basing your plans for 2020, when our population in our commission has more than doubled, and that the impact of the traffic has increased exponentially. My concern is I don't think that these plans reflect what the actual traffic is at this point and what the population is at this point, and what the impact these changes will have on not just the residents, but also the motorists who use these roads.
Thanks, Commissioner. That's a great question. Yeah, this study was completed, 3.5-4 years ago now, and there has been ongoing engagement throughout that time. We came back, as Commissioner Bass was just reminding me, in 2018 and had a conversation about this project then. We believe that though the city changes very quickly, that the infrastructure in this neighborhood has not significantly changed since 2016. We still have the same roads and sidewalks and bike lanes, the same amount of parking. So in that sense, the material conditions that we're discussing are essentially the same as they were. And in terms of the variables that have changed during that time, you're absolutely right. Population changes, traffic changes. During the public health emergency, we've actually seen a really rapid decline in traffic as people stopped driving to work and moving around as much. And now it's starting to come back a little bit. So, things definitely do shift in certain ways, and in other ways they do stay the same. But we believe that this study is still relevant, valid, and is still guiding our work here today. So I hope that's a satisfactory answer to the question.
Well, it's an answer. It's not satisfactory, but it's an answer. Thank you.
I do what I can. Thank you very much.
Aaron,
Yes.
I also wanted to flag 2 brief questions we also received. Will these slides be sent out afterwards? So yes, I will make sure to post those on our website, our Transportation Committee website, as well as I assume on DDOT as well. And number 2, going back to the previous slide with the timeline.
Yes.
We had a question regarding at which points will community input be solicited?
Well, so that's a good question. We haven't made a concrete decision on that yet. I think that is going to be a conversation between the ANC and DDOT. I think it would be wholly appropriate for us to come back with plans that are more developed than what we have now, obviously. At least we need to probably come back and talk to you at least once more. I'm happy to do it several times as the ANC deems appropriate. So that's something we're going to have to figure out. And this timeline, let me just say, this is not set in stone. This is what we hope happen, but you never know. We could get hit by an asteroid tomorrow or something else. Another. We've had our lives totally upended by the pandemic. Anything could happen. So please don't take this timeline to be set in stone. But this is, I think, given what we know today, I think a pretty good estimation. Okay, so going back to sort of a broad overview of what the project is looking like at this point, what our concept is we want to add parking protected bike lanes on Park Place and on Warder Street. And of course, these are both one-way streets. So the bike lanes would be one way as well, following the flow of traffic. So Park Place, it would be a southbound bike lane, and on Warder Street, it would be a northbound bike lane. And then they would both connect to the bike lanes that we just finished building on Irving and on Kenyon. They would not remove the parking on the sides of the street they're built on. So there's bike lanes there already. So essentially what we're talking about, and I'm going to show you this in a moment, but we're just going to flip where the bike lane and where the cars are so that there is parked cars, keeping the moving cars separate from the bicycle traffic, and the bicycle traffic is going to move next to the sidewalk where it'll be separated from the sidewalk by the curb. And again, you're going to see pictures of all this in a moment. The other thing we want to do is convert one of the southbound travel lanes on Park Place into a parking lane. So it would go from being moving cars to parked cars. At the ANC's request, we're also interested in converting Park Road to be a one-way eastbound. This request came to us, I believe it was sort of late last year. We did some analysis of the traffic and we found it's going to have no adverse impact. It's not going to increase congestion. So we think that that's a great idea to add, again, more parking on the south side of Park Road and to make the area safer by having fewer like turning movements. So this project essentially is going to be adding 2 protected bike lanes where we already have bike lanes today. We're just going to be sort of upgrading them to the next level, making them better. We're going to be adding in parking for the neighborhood, which it would then be, to the DDOT and the ANC to determine if those are RPP spaces or some other kind of parking restricted space. And we want to make Park Road one-way eastbound. Any questions about that before I jump into the drawings?
Yes, I do have a question. This is Commissioner Love-Wade again.
Yes.
So with respect to Water Street, you're having the bike lane would be the curb lane, and then the parking lane would be next to the bike lane. Is that correct? And then the traffic lane of Water. Is that traffic lane going to be narrower?
Yes, it's going to get a little bit narrower.
Does that create more hazards for parked vehicles to be sideswiped? I mean, I'm really concerned about that. That was one of my major concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
bikes, but by narrowing that lane, as a fact, that the vehicles are getting wider, they're not getting any more narrow. And just the safety of people's property, as vehicles traverse Water Street, the likelihood of being sideswiped increases exponentially. I know we have this problem here on Columbia Road when our streets, are parked on both sides and buses and trucks come up. Cars are dented and banged all the time, and insurance companies, raise your rates, and then people then don't report it, and their cars are banged, or they try to pay for it out of pocket. So these are considerations that, personally, living on a street with these issues, I don't want to impose them now on us unsuspecting neighbors who, safely park their vehicles for years.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. That is a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So I guess that just first to sort of frame this, we don't implement projects that make roads less safe. I mean, that is just the opposite of what we do. We really, everything we do, the very first thing that we look at is this going to increase safety? And if the answer is not yes, then we don't do it. What we find when we narrow travel lanes is that it has what's called a traffic calming effect. So it actually makes people slow down. So what we find in projects like this, when we constrain the travel lane with a little bit, is it causes people to slow down and drive more carefully. So what I would expect is that when we do a traffic calming measure like this, it would actually decrease the amount of that kind of side swiping traffic incident that you describe. But thank you for bringing that up. Anything else?
I hope that works on that street, because it absolutely does not work on my block. Well,
Yeah.
Not just my block, but the whole Columbia Road stretch that shares the road with buses and commercial vehicles. So I'm not anticipating that Water Street would have the commercial and bus transportation, but it is something that is very concerning. So I bring this to your attention so that, not that I think that DDOT does not consider public safety at all times, but I can also attest that some of the decisions have had deleterious effects on public safety. But that's not what this meeting is about. I just would like you to consider my concerns as you fine-tune the project in any way that you can.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, that we'll make sure we take a look at that.
Aaron, looking through the questions, it looks like you've addressed a lot of what has been brought up, but we have one question. Is there still an opportunity to create bump outs with tree boxes on Park Place? It would be great to add tree cover on the stretch between Quebec and Irving, where the sidewalks are currently very narrow.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So that's jumping ahead a little bit. We're going to get into that
that's
stuff in a moment. Yeah, no, but let me just say now that one of the things that DDOT is really interested in learning this evening is really about the community's priorities, because there are trade-offs. We can, potentially. How do I explain this? We are going to have budget constraints. This project is going to have a budget. I don't know what that is yet, but I'm sure it will have one. So we're not able to do everything necessarily that we would want to do. And the more items that we add to this, it could potentially slow things down. It could potentially constrain, if we want to extend this geographically, to add in, additional blocks. If we are doing tree work, it could potentially prevent that. Tree work is fairly complex. We would have to bring in another DDOT team that specializes in green infrastructure, because trees, if you're a planner, trees are infrastructure, even though it doesn't seem like they are, but they are. And, it could, if we start digging up more of the road, increase the amount of permitting that we need to go through, because when you start disturbing more surface, you have to do additional environmental regulatory compliance stuff. So it'll be helpful for me to have a better understanding of, how we would weight you know, adding trees where we don't have trees in the concept now, versus expanding the project scope versus focusing on just the bike lane piece. So I hope that kind of makes sense that, you know, I'm probably going to have to come back later when I get a better sense of what the community's priorities are and say, okay, now I've talked to the engineers and here's what we can actually reasonably do in the timeline that we have. Typically adding street trees and elements like that, bump outs, is something we would do with a streetscape project. And this is not a streetscape project. A streetscape project is when we really holistically look not just at the roadway, but at the sidewalk, at the tree boxes, and we try and sort of holistically reimagine all that. Those projects take between 5 and 7 years. What we're kind of hoping to do here is something that's really just sort of between the curb and is going to be a little, you know, easier for us to design and quicker for us to implement. But again, it depends on what the community wants. So with all that being said, let's take a look at what the actual concept is that we have. This is from 2018, and this is very, very small, as you might notice. So I'm going to flip over to a different screen where I can zoom in on this. And this is probably very hard for anybody to see or to understand right now, but just while I've got it all zoomed out, I'm just going to point out that on the left side of the screen is the left is south, right is north. It's a little bit confusing. So on the right-hand side, you can see Grant Circle, which is the northern limit of the project as it's imagined right now. On the far left-hand side, we have Kenyon Street, where we just finished putting in the new bike lane. So you can kind of see where we are connecting all of this up along Park and Warder. What you're not going to see here is the one-way conversion on Park Road. We do not have drawings for that yet, but we'll let you know when we've got that. But that is part of the scope of the project that we're considering. So I'm just going to switch over to a different screen. Okay. All right. So I have zoomed us in and I have reoriented us so that south is down and north is up the way it should be, so that this can make some kind of sense. So we're starting at the southernmost boundary of the project as it is conceived right now. You know, like I said, the scope of this project is open for discussion. If we people have already floated the idea of extending it further south on Warder, of extending it further west on Kenyon, and we're not considering that at this point, but it's something we can discuss. So, okay, so let's.
Certainly glad you're not considering that at this time.
Well, it's not.
I'm
It's not
certainly
in our.
glad to hear that.
It's not in our plans right now, but it's something that if there's a strong interest in, we would take that very seriously, and we would come back to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, so, okay, so let me zoom in a little bit more here. So here's an example of what we're interested in doing here on Warder. You can see this is the Warder just north of Kenyon. You can see how you've got the bike lane there on the right-hand side. You've got the parking on both sides. We've got some new trees here proposed in the concept. And then if we look to the east over at Park, a similar configuration here with the bike lane there on the far east side. As we move north, we're going to go past Lamont, go past Luray Place. And you can see here on the right-hand side, sort of at the top right of your screen on Park, you can see where we're actually adding in new parking. And you can see this is how Park Place is going to a single travel lane going southbound. And we can see those trees there on Warder. We do not at this time have trees in the concept for Park, but I hear that as a point of interest, and we're happy to talk about that. So this is essentially the plan. When we reach intersections, like you can see here at Newton and Warder, we would do green striping for the bike lane through the intersection, which is fairly common in the district now. We would do a similar treatment where there are alleys and driveways to make sure that people using bicycles and scooters are being safe as they travel through those areas where there's traffic coming in from the sides, from driveways and alleys. So I think what I'm going to do next is we're going to head on up and we're going to look at one of the roadway cross sections. So I'm just panning sort of northward. And here we are. So of course now this is sideways. So let's rotate this so that it is the right way up. Okay. So, and Commissioner, I wanted to pull this out to show how we were looking at the travel lanes. So we would have, 11-foot travel lanes to 12-foot travel lanes throughout the whole project area, which we believe is safe and is standard. We would have 5-foot long, 5-foot wide rather, bike lanes, 3-foot barriers, standard with parking lanes. So this gives you sort of a cross section of what these roads would look like after this project is implemented. And I feel like I should probably pause here because I know I just sort of covered a lot of stuff, and see if there's any questions, if there's any particular intersections or blocks people want to go and look at specifically. Or maybe I'm just doing a great job and we're all totally, we're good.
Looking in the comments, we have park and park. We have someone asking to look at park and park place.
Yeah.
And also a question regarding safe crossings for bikes turning right onto Park Place.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what I have to sort of caution you, and I got to find where I am on the map here. What I have to sort of caution you is that this drawing is not going to reflect how the Park and Park Place intersection is going to look when we're done. And that's because this drawing does not take into account the one-way conversion that we would like to do. So, I can't show you how that turning is going to be striped or signalized or what have you. We're going to have to come back with that information later. But this is the intersection. Again, this is showing two-way traffic on Park Road. But our plan is to make Park Road one-way. So I believe we've discussed a counterflow bike lane on Park Road so that bikes would be able to travel westbound. I'm not sure if a final decision has been made on that yet. So were there to be a counterflow bike lane on Park Road where the turn would occur for the cyclist is here. You can see, hopefully I've zoomed in enough, that they would be exiting the protection there, crossing the intersection. Now, I think it's quite possible that we would be adding, what we sometimes call puppy tracks or green striping through this intersection to make it clear that there may be bicycle traffic crossing. That's a level of detail that we're just not at yet. We're still at a fairly abstract, sort of the concept phase. So that is one of those fine details that we're going to have to think hard about and make sure that we get right. Sort of just anticipating where that question might be going. So hopefully I'm showing what the segment of interest was here.
Aaron, this is Commissioner Bass, if I may interject a comment on this intersection. I would like you to consider perhaps a stop sign at that intersection for southbound traffic. The reason is, and first of all, the 2 lanes of Park Place have always been tremendous. People travel at tremendous speeds. And the problem is they drive to the speed of the road that you've built, and you've built a raceway.
Pierre Lafont built that road. I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, no. Pierre Lafont had nothing to do about this. This section of the city was built before the plan even went north of Florida. So don't blame him.
Okay.
This had to do more about the 1950s. Let's put a freeway in that we never completed. That said, I do think it helps to get it down to 1 lane. However, at this intersection, we have 2 problems. One is we still have 8 blocks of uncontrolled street. So once you get on this stretch, you don't have to stop, and people tend to drive faster when they don't have to worry about it. If you have eastbound traffic on Park Road coming out, one of the problems you have is that you have eastbound traffic that will be turning southbound from southbound traffic that doesn't have to stop. And a few years ago, the house at the northwest corner had new construction. They subdivided the lot and built a new structure on the corner, which creates a blind spot. So what I have observed is cars traveling eastbound on Park Road, in order to turn south on Park Place, they have to creep out into the intersection so that they can see. Because that's what happens when we allow new development on side yards that weren't originally designed for it. I think you might need to consider something that makes that intersection safe. That was a long way of saying I think you need a stop sign.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the level of detail in the recommendation. So, in just for everybody's context here, when it comes to things like that, and Commissioner Bass knows this, but other people attending the meeting may not. I'm not the decider. Actually, I should be clear that I'm not really the decider on anything. I'm the lead planner on the project, but I just sort of synthesize and bring together the community input and the traffic engineers, and it's going to be the engineering team that's going to make final determinations on questions like this, whether to add stop signs, signals, traffic control devices like that. But I am going to include that as a piece of feedback. And that's the kind of input that I'm really looking for here this evening, concrete things that I can take to that team for them to evaluate.
Aaron, I've got a quick question related to that, actually, unless you had someone else's question to get to. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's my understanding that typically you only see 11, 12-foot lanes when you need either bus traffic or a substantial amount of commercial traffic through there. If that's the case, why are there still those wider lanes here as opposed to maybe 10-foot lanes, travel lanes?
Oh, well, lane width is clearly a subject of discussion here. And we are going to look at count and volume data to make sure that we, are right sizing the travel lanes based on the types of vehicles that are traveling here. That's not information that I have in front of me in a way that I could, discuss in an articulate manner at this moment. But, we do have a fair amount of vehicle traffic based on the hospital. So we do want to make sure that we're accommodating ambulances, fire trucks, things of that nature. So I'm definitely not saying that the travel lanes will wind up being 10, 11, or 12 feet. They will be somewhere in that range. And some guys who went to grad school for engineering for a long time are going to spend a couple of months thinking hard about that. But if there is if there's a particular, David, I assume that you would prefer to see them on the narrower side.
I mean, that would be our preference, fully accepting the fact that there can be a legitimate reason why they'd be wider. I just want to make sure that both of that was thought through, and that I think that it's good to talk about that for the benefit of the folks on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely have that down under my lane width category now. And I do think it will be probably there's going to need to be some conversation with Fire EMS. We've already had a little bit of a preliminary look at what the routes they use through this area are to make sure that we're being careful on those corridors. So we'll take a close look at that.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. Aaron, do you have much more presentation to go, or have we officially gone into Q&A? Just so I know how to manage time.
Yes, this is it.
Okay.
You got me until like 9 o'clock.
Oh, well, I might take you till 10. Can you go up to the intersection of Park Place and Park Place?
I think actually that is where we are. I just need to.
No. You're at Park Place and Road.
Park Place and Park Place. Yes.
It's Triangle Park.
Yeah.
And yeah, can you scroll in a little bit? Because I was I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. And one of the things we talked about, and I just wanted to see if you can go over this, was trying to rework the slip lane into the major park place so that it's narrower and perhaps makes it a safer pedestrian crossing for getting to the Triangle Park. And if you could talk a little bit about what you're proposing to do there or what you're considering to do there.
So with the slip lane specifically?
Well, I just wanted to see what your drawing showed as far as making that a safer intersection, because again, talking about traffic, you know, and I apologize for talking about something that's very close to where I live, but that also means I get to observe a lot of traffic behavior that's not desired. What we see is, because it's not a right angle getting into that lane, and then it's not a right angle getting out, that people tend to slow down to make those turns, but they don't slow down substantially. And then because of where the stop sign currently is a setback easily a car length from the intersection, people tend not to stop at the stop sign because they can't see anything. And then once they're past the stop sign, they don't really stop again. It just becomes a very slow roll. And that's not safe for pedestrians at all. So it just seems to me that there's a huge opportunity there to realign the sidewalk, slow down traffic, get a car to actually stop at a stop sign, which to me is a win-win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And my particular frustration with this area in particular is the weird misalignment of the curb cut for the sidewalk for the ADA ramp. It just like drives me crazy. So you know, at the level of abstraction that, you know, since we're sort of early on in this design process, what we're showing here, and I'll zoom in just a little bit more, is a bulb out here. So there would be a traffic calming effect where the car traffic would have a, you know, constrained width as we've been discussing. And I don't know if it's entirely clear from the drawing. It's a little busy over here, but you can see sort of there's a white line which traces both the crosswalk and the parking area. But that's an area where we would be effectively constraining the road width. Now, how we do that is not a settled question by any means. Are we doing that? As you've seen in many parts of the city, we're doing that in a lot of places with paint and flex posts. So that's a potential treatment here. Or are we doing this with concrete and curb work? You know, that's something that I think is still a matter of discussion. So I can guess that you'd prefer to see this bulb out done in concrete and actually physically moving the curb, realigning this. So I can add that in as a piece of feedback for the design team to look at.
Well, I would, and I'll tell you for a couple of reasons. One, the reason that the crosswalk isn't where the crosswalk should be is because there's a conflict with a storm drain, and that needs to be resolved. But also, I'm not against the flexi posts, but I also know in my daily walk going up Rock Creek Church to, is it Webster? The 15 flex posts that are there are now down to 4. And then 8 months later, we might be able to get DDOT to come put them back in, and they're down to 4 again, because people drive where they want to drive. And, you know, the big problem with that intersection is the flexi posts have been put in such a way to essentially say you can turn south only, but everyone wants to turn left, not right. And so they just drive over the flexi post until it's not there anymore, and they do what they want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think flex posts have usefulness in certain cases, and they're certainly an attractive option for us because we can install them relatively quickly and relatively cheaply. Now, obviously, keeping them installed has proven to be a challenge, and that's something we got to work on. So yes, I will take that to the design team. I guess a follow-up question for you, Commissioner, is, you know, when we're thinking about this slip lane, is there anything we need to do further up, if that makes sense?
You know, actually, if you wanted to put in some flexi posts for the entrance, maybe that would help too. I don't think that would have to be a big cost item. Because there's rarely much of a conflict there. You know, again, it would be nice if cars would slow down a little bit more before they go in there, but it's a bigger safety issue at the southern end because there is a stop sign there and people expect cars to stop and they don't stop. But we can dig into more details on that off this conversation. I know there are a number of other questions and I don't want to take up all the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Aaron. I know it sounds like you're not able to see the questions in the question box, so I want to jump on these. Can you show the southernmost part of Park Place? Will bikes have to cross across Park Place at Kenyon to rejoin the bike lane that heads south along the reservoir?
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
And related to that, it looks like, do your Warder and park protected bike lanes go down to the Michigan mixing bowl and connect with 5th Street Northwest?
Okay, so let's sort of take that stuff one thing at a time. And I might have to ask you to repeat some of that. So here we are, and I'm going to just zoom it out a little bit. So here we are at Park Place and Kenyon. So first thing you might notice about this drawing is that it's wrong. This is not what this looks like. During the design process between 2018 and 2020, our design team realized that the bike lane on Irving was going to be safer if it was on the south side. And the reasons for that are complicated. It has to do with the way that it crosses Hobart. And it's a little bit off this drawing, unfortunately, so I can't really show you very well. But leaving all that aside, the bike lane here on the drawing you can see is built on the north side of Irving, and it is not there in reality. It is on the south side, as is true on Kenyon as well. So how are cyclists going to get from the Park Place protected bike lane to onto Kenyon or Irving? You know, this drawing, I think, sort of gives you a sense of what we were thinking, that there is going to be a designated space in the intersection for cyclists to wait, that there is going to be a dedicated turning signal phase. Beyond that, unfortunately, this drawing is not too helpful, and I don't want to try and predict the way the design team is going to solve that problem. It is a tricky thing to do, but it is something we do at other intersections throughout the city. I'm confident that they're going to come up with a safe way for that traffic to flow. But I think I would be remiss trying to get into too much detail as to how exactly that could be done. I think there's multiple ways it could be done. So I'm sorry not to give a very detailed and satisfying answer on that question. But, you know, it will be a combination of paint through the intersection, creating a place for cyclists to wait, and carefully managing the signals to make sure that there's no conflicts when those turns are occurring. And there was a part 2 to that question. I totally forget what it was.
There was a part 2, and then I wanted to tackle those before we get to Commissioner Brown's question. Do your Warder and Park protected bike lanes go down to the Michigan mixing bowl and connect down to the 5th Street Northwest protected bike lane?
So I think the question is, do the... Oh, I see what the question is. The answer is no. Not in the current project scope. And unfortunately, my drawing doesn't go any further south than this. But these bike lanes stop at Kenyon. They do not proceed down Warder or Park Place to Michigan Avenue into 5th Street. I think that's something we might want to think about if we want to address that, because it's a fairly short, you know, it's 2 blocks. I think that's something we can try and think about including in this potentially, if that's something that there's interest in. But short answer to that question is no.
And I think right now would be a great time to bring up Commissioner Brown's question. And Commissioner Brown, if you just want to share it yourself, please, by all means.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Barczyk. So Aaron, there might be a few people in this meeting that are trying to better understand the plan for extending the protected bike lanes along Kenyon and potential impact on parking. Can you answer that, and also just explaining a little bit about the reason for the bike lane flip from the north side to the south side, which I believe that was the initial part of the plans?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Commissioner. So at this point, we are not planning on extending the bike lane further down Kenyon. So there is a protected bike lane at this time here, between Warder and Park. I think that there is interest from some people in the community to extend it and to travel, to extend the protected bike lane, further down Kenyon towards Georgia Avenue. That is not a part of this concept. If that's something that the community is interested in, we can consider it, along with everything else that we've been discussing today. But at this point, the extending the protected bike lane down Kenyon is not in the current project scope.
Yeah,
but that is a subject for discussion. Sorry.
Thank you. I think the recommendation is to make sure that we have retain the parking that we have in the neighborhood, especially since along Kenyon we have many seniors who drive. So we want to, make sure to respect those that are in the community and have been living there as long-term residents for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me speak to that a little bit. So this project as a whole adds parking. It's going to add at least 10 spaces. And that's not counting the parking that we're going to add when we do the one-way conversion on Park Road. So I haven't done a count on that yet, but we're going to be adding potentially 24 parking spaces total in the neighborhood. So that's kind of, it's rare that we can both build bike lanes and add parking in. So that's kind of amazing that we're able to do both with this one project. Now parking is going to sort of move around in the neighborhood.
Yeah, if I could just interject there, the parking that you're adding is further north. The Kenyon parking that Commissioner Brown is alluding to is to the south, quite a distance apart. So to gain parking up north is great, but I think her concern is more with the parking that would be potentially lost on the further south on Kenyon. Am I correct?
Well, I think that yes, parking is a concern in general on Kenyon, but I think with the expansion for parking, proposed parking, Aaron, just so that folks could really understand where that parking would go, I think it's important to talk about specifically where it is, because I know we talked about Park Place and particular areas along Warder. So can you talk a little bit about where that would be?
Yeah. So I think that what we're discussing here is we did. Okay, so let me back up a moment before I get confused. So originally the protected bike lane, as the drawing shows, was going to be on the north side of Kenyon, and it was switched to the south side of Kenyon towards the end of that design. I'm again, we're sorry for any sort of confusion that caused. It was done to make the traffic patterns more safe. And specifically the location where we had the safety concern was around, just gonna see if I can, well, unfortunately, I don't think I'm gonna be able to pull this up, but where Kenyon, Irving, and Hobart intersect, the crossing there was very complicated. It involved the protected bike lane moving from, in that design draft, moving from the center up to the north, and that just wasn't really safe for anybody. So that's why the protected bike lane got reoriented to the south side of the street there. The ANC has resolved in favor of converting the Kenyon Street parking on the north side of Kenyon from being rush hour restricted to being RPP, which we have taken a look at. It is something that is on the table for including in this project. We would have to make those changes through Crosstown Phase 2.
Great.
So if that is a priority for the community, what that would mean is removing the travel lane on Kenyon. That is only a rush hour travel lane. So there might be a congestion impact. But if that, and I would have to come back with more detailed information. I think we could probably spend a lot of time just discussing that particular proposal in more depth, but that would, I think, address your question.
Yeah, and I think the recommendation also is to not create a bottleneck that starts at the 400 block of Kenyon, but really kind of narrowing that line of traffic closer to the hospital centers and ward.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I completely agree with that. I think that the intent would be not to have like any kind of funnel happening there on the 400 block. We would want to move that merge action. We would want to move that further to the east so that was happening on Irving before you cross Park Place. But that's a great point.
This is Commissioner Ray. The only point I would say, though, in what you're talking about, it being part of Phase 2 means that, right now we're in the pandemic and there is no rush hour lane, but we're talking 18 months. The people who live on that block are going to deal with not having the parking that they used to have. So if there was any way to phase that in a little earlier in this timeline, then that would certainly be recommended.
Okay. I'll look into that. I know that just to manage expectations, they like to kind of do the whole thing all at once, both for, lining up the contractors and the budget and all that. So there's a strong preference on the implementation side to do big chunks. But I'm going to raise that and we'll see what we can do.
Aaron, we do have a question from Ali Bobak with Councilmember Nadeau's office asking how everyone what is the best way to stay engaged on this project? Is there a certain place that people should be looking for updates? Keeping in mind that we don't want any surprises to happen.
Absolutely. So that's a good question. You can email me. We're going to email out this slide deck. We're going to make the slide deck public, and it's got my direct email on it. It does not have my phone number on it, and it's not because I don't want to talk to folks on the phone. It's because my work phone is a landline sitting on a desk in an office that I don't know when I'm going to be at next. So if you called and left a message for me there, it might be a long time before I get it. But you do have my email address. And also Crosstown has a website, which is cool. Now, it has not been updated since 2019, but we are going to be updating it with this information as this project moves forward. Now, when exactly that's going to happen, I'm not totally sure. Hopefully soon. So when that website has been updated, and it's worth looking at now because it's got like all of this historical, all this background stuff that I think for people who really want to dig into this project and understand how we got here, I think it's worth looking at for that. But for the things and like this drawing that I'm showing everybody, like that's on there. For the new stuff that we're discussing this evening, that's not going to be up there just yet. It's going to probably take us a little while to get that updated, but the website has a lot of information, and we will be getting that updated, and I will let you know when those updates happen. So multiple ways to stay engaged. Beyond that, I'm sure that the council member's office would love to hear from their constituents on this project. I'm sure the ANC would love to hear from their constituents on this project. DDOT has community development specialists. Syra is on this call with us right now, and I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from folks as well. So there are multiple ways, multiple people, different places to reach out to let us know what you think about this.
And I just want to flag for people, if you're asking questions, if you are able to press the question and answer button on the bottom, that will help me go through these because they're starting to bleed into our conversations on the side. We do have a Commissioner Bass, did you want to ask your question about Kenyon?
I think Rashida, Commissioner Brown already, and perhaps Commissioner Ray already got into this when I was saying that the lanes really need to go from multiple lanes down to one lane before you get to the intersection of Park Place. Because right now, when the light changes, everyone jockeys for position and you might get 7 vehicles that go through the intersection, which that's great if you're further west because it's slowing down traffic, but people are getting frustrated by that intersection. And I love the parking on the north side. I think that really should be a 1-lane street. So that improvement isn't the problem. I think you have plenty of real estate east of Park Place to create better traffic flow, and I recommend that you do it. One thing I do want you to talk about before this evening ends, and feel free to put a pin on it to answer some of these other questions first, but I would like you to go over the possibility of bulb outs for street trees, since they're on the map for Warder.
Yeah, absolutely. I can sort of get into that now, unless, and I'm not reading the comments. I'm not looking at the chat or the Q&A. So is there anything else you want me to discuss first before we get into trees?
So just, these are easy ones. Just confirm, because I saw an earlier question, that the bike lanes that are being installed are one way in the direction of the road, which is true. And then there was a question about the sidewalk on the other side of Park Place. There is not currently a sidewalk on the other side of Park Place, and I assume that that is not your intent right now.
It is not our intent right now, but like many of the things we've discussed this evening, if that is something there's strong community support for, we could do it if that's something that you really feel like you need. Again, that would take us more in the direction of a streetscape project. And part of my concern is that if I take too many asks to the engineers, that they're going to come back and say, hey, we need to turn this into a 5-year-long streetscape project. And I don't think that we want that. So there might be trade-offs, if just hypothetically, if we decide really what we want is a sidewalk on that side of Park. I think that's something we could do. I think that is something that might preclude doing other things like the trees. And I'm not suggesting that there is like a 1-to-1 trade-off here, but
cost is always a factor. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're all kind of gritting our teeth waiting to see what the budget situation turns into.
Thank you. So I would go ahead and talk about the trees now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let me find, okay. So here is our tree drawing. So what we're thinking about doing here is adding in street trees by extending the curb into the roadway, essentially. And then adding in, soil, digging down, and planting trees in these bulb outs. So this is, again, sort of a concept design, and I know that there's been some feedback on this design specifically, and it does not reflect that feedback that I've received and reviewed. So this is an area where I'm going to have to admit I am not an expert when it comes to this kind of infrastructure. So this is an example of something at DDOT we would call green infrastructure. And this has a lot of uses. And it's like kind of funny to talk about trees in this like utilitarian way, because trees are like beautiful and we just like to have them around. But trees like do a lot of concrete things for our streets that are like really good. They provide shade, which is like good. It keeps people's energy costs down in the summertime. They actually create like a physical barrier between the road and the sidewalk. So like if a runaway truck situation, like it's actually good to have trees there. They enhance pedestrian safety. The main thing that they do, though, and probably the biggest benefit they would add in this area in a way, besides the traffic calming effect of the bulb out, is another thing that they do is they provide a way for rainwater to run off and to filter into the ground. And so if today we had a lot of rain yesterday and today, so you might have noticed that our sewer system, our gutters do tend to overflow, especially in areas where we have a lot of concrete streets and alleys, smaller blocks like this, smaller yards. The more open green space you have, the more opportunity there is for stormwater to filter down into the ground, and the less likely it is that that stormwater then winds up in your basement. So it's a good thing to do. So all that being said, this is an area where I do not have much expertise. We have a whole other team at DDOT that does green infrastructure projects. We need them to spend some time thinking hard about where trees are feasible, whether the design recommendations for the bulb outs are going to be feasible, or if they're going to constrain the amount of soil too much for trees to grow successfully. So I don't have a ton of additional information at this point. We've got to take a close look and figure out, are there utility lines here? Are we going to be moving around water, gas, power lines, that kind of stuff? Because that can actually really add cost to the project. I would say that, just from a budget perspective for this project, probably like the more trees we do, that's probably going to be like the single greatest potential source of increase for the cost. So there are 11 potential trees identified on Warder. We did not identify any on Park because the sense was that Park, sort of already has a pretty good amount of street trees on it, though I'm sure we can find places where that is not the case, just like in general. That was the sense.
Actually, I would say Park between Georgia Avenue and Warder Street have 0 trees. So that, I've been contacted by neighbors that would like to see something like that in there. So I would certainly want to see what you think could be done once the team gets a chance to look at it.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that is going to be one of those things where I'm gonna need to come back to you with more information. But so what would be really helpful for me right now is just to learn sort of more about, like, what would you like to see? What when I come back, what do you want me to say? Not like, what do you want me to say? But you know what I'm trying. What I mean.
Do you really want to ask that question?
I think I could guess, but
What do you want more? That's an easy answer. More. The reason all of these things come up, and I know from a transportation perspective, your first instinct is bike lane. Well, you just have to flip the space for the car and the bike, and I think that's fine. However, this is a neighborhood in a part of the city where when I go on my soapbox and talk about what would a city look like if you allowed developers to do 100% of the planning, and I use that lightly, with no zoning and no oversight, this is what it would look like, because that is exactly what happened in this part of the city. The L'Enfant plan didn't get implemented outside north of Florida Avenue until after this section of Ward 1 was already completed. And that's why we have streets that are more narrow than anywhere else. That's why they curve funny. They're at angles. They come in at 30-degree angles. But also, to that point, the heart of this neighborhood has no street trees, 0. This isn't a matter of just filling tree boxes. And this isn't a matter of just, oh, well, let's plant some. They never existed. The assumption from the developers was that the front yards would be large enough that you could put a tree in your front yard, or in your rear yard. Well, the truth of the matter is sometimes the yards aren't that big, and the space that looks like it could hold a tree actually has utilities under it. So it's not like you can just tree it up that way. And over time, let's also be honest, over time, the city has widened the streets to be more accommodating of our modern needs and standards at the detriment of public space and narrower sidewalks. Even in this area, we have sidewalks that are not ADA compliant and are not going to be ADA compliant because there's just no space. I know of a number of places where, God help you if you're in a wheelchair or pushing a stroller, because you will have to go to the other side of the street or push it into the street light that is in the middle of the sidewalk, right? So yeah, I mean, if the long-winded answer to this, well, if I can shorten this, is DDOT wants to improve transportation options in the neighborhood, and we fully support that. But we also want DDOT to come in and look at all of these infrastructure issues that prevent us from being a neighborhood that has all of the quality of life amenities that any other neighborhood nearby has. Now, we know you're not going to solve everything, and we know that there's only so much money, but I think from starters, everything needs to be on the table, and then we should build to the money we have rather than underplan and leave money on the table.
Gotcha. So I have a couple of follow-ups just to drill down on some of the details. Would a preferred, you know, when I come back with the iterated version of this, would the preference be to see a balanced amount of new trees on Park and Warder? Essentially, do we want to aim for an even distribution based on whatever the constraints happen to be, or does it feel like one corridor has more need than the other?
Personally, I would say that it would be even, because again, in Warder Street, there are no street trees on the southern, on our more southern end of the area, and the same is true for like I said, Georgia to Warder. Kent, I'd have to ask if you remember if there are any from Warder to Park Place.
Warder on
Park.
On Park Road?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And there's no sidewalk space to put them in. No, I've spent a lot of time over the years looking for opportunities where trees could go in with some infrastructure work. So really on Park Road, Warder Street, for the most part, I'd say south of the rec center, the west side of Park Place, though. The only place trees are ever going to go on those areas are with bump outs. That's right. The only option. And I know that those are trade-offs. And to that point, back before the November 7th, 2018 meeting, we'd seen this plan set with some of the proposed street trees. And we knew that some of them weren't located to optimize a balance between the need for greening and the need to minimize impacts on street parking. And so we'd made some recommendations of perhaps tweaking it, alternative locations, trying to find an opportunity to have both as much as possible. But that said, if this were an instance where DDOT said, we can give you 20 trees, where do you want them? Based on where the utilities are, where the impacts are going to be on parking, I would be okay if we had a discussion like that saying, well, we could put 5 on this street, 4 on this street, maybe 2 on this street. I don't have a problem with them being equitably distributed throughout the community versus all being on one corridor and addressing that at one time. I think that we would all be open to flexibility based on what's possible and the funding available and what's going on under the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just tag on one quick thing, which is we would not need to worry about the area around the Park Morton, because that will be redeveloped with additional trees as part of that development. So we're north of there at least. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call out. And by the way, I've checked with the Park Morton team, and everything that we're discussing here this evening works with them. It's not going to change anything about that project. I get the sense that of the streets we're discussing, Park Road is probably the least feasible, is my guess, just to manage expectations. I think that the design team was hoping to do the one-way conversion on Park Road without doing any curb work, without doing bump outs necessarily. So I just sort of anticipate them wanting to focus on Warder and Park Place for tree work. So let me know if that's, not what you all are looking for. But I get the sense that they want to have a fairly light touch on Park Road and just do the one-way conversion with, you know, signage and paint and so on.
Aaron, we do have a question that's outstanding regarding the park sidewalk on the east side of Park sidewalk, because I know we haven't discussed that in any detail up to this point. The person asked, would a sidewalk really be an option on the east side of Park with the old Soldiers Home property? It would be great to help address, obviously, the conflict that could happen with people getting out of their cars, also stepping into the bike lane.
Yeah, so a sidewalk over on there, on that side, I think that would be pretty hard. I think it would be pretty hard. I think it could be done. I think anything could be done. And, you know, especially with the development that's going to happen with the old Soldiers Home, you know, I think that there may be future opportunities not connected to this project to pursue pedestrian infrastructure over there. Based on my sort of, you know, inexpert non-engineering look at this, you know, getting a raised grade sidewalk as a standard, I think would be especially pretty difficult here. And it might, I mean, it would almost certainly eliminate the ability to add in the parking lane there. I don't think we could do both. I just don't think the geography, the physics of it would work out. So I don't think I'm answering your question very well. I think it's technically possible. I think it would be a big trade-off with other stuff.
I mean, that answers the question from my angle. Okay. And there's a common worry about cars opening doors into bikers if there's no space in between.
Yeah, no, I mean, if we're doing a parking protected bike lane, we're going to have a 3-foot buffer to protect users of the lane from getting doored, from getting hit by car doors that are opening, and to protect people stepping out of their cars, to protect them from getting hit by people on bicycles or scooters, you know. So we would make sure that if we're putting car parking next to a bike lane, that we would have that buffer space to keep all the users safe. And you know, throughout this conversation, we've been talking about bike lanes. I want to stop calling them bike lanes, because I you know, this is infrastructure that is intended not just for people on bikes, but we've seen, obviously everybody's seen this explosion of people using scooters. And that's another major goal of this project that I don't know if I've really emphasized, is that we hear concerns from people that there are people, you know, driving the scooters on the sidewalk. And we agree that that is a problem. And we find that the best solution for that problem is to create protected lanes for people. So really, it's sort of inaccurate to say it's a bike lane. It's more of like a light vehicle lane or a sustainable vehicle lane or something. We've got to come up with a better name, because it doesn't quite capture what we're trying to do here anymore. There's more stuff happening. So anyway, that's just sort of a little tangent. But I thought I would mention that as well. Are there other questions?
Oh, I'll ask one, and it's on you, because you talking about scooters made me think about it. And that makes me think of like the jump bikes and the scooters and everything that's more of a share transportation option. In this plan, is there any way, or do you see any opportunities where something like a bike corral could be created? And I'm thinking about storage specifically because I do, you know, getting back to our sidewalks being more narrow and having less opportunities than other neighborhoods. When someone brings their jump bike onto the block, you know, that's fine, but it could be sitting on the sidewalk for several days before someone else needs it, and that's potentially in somebody's way. So since we're looking at streetscape, and we talked about the bollards a bit, and perhaps managing some of the public space for perhaps cordoning it off from vehicular traffic, but not, in some cases, not necessarily taking that space away. Is that dead space that could be used as a bike corral?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point. I'm a big fan of trying to use scooter parking and bike parking, to sort of get two birds with one piece of infrastructure, to like really mix my metaphors in a really terrible way. So I think that there's going to be a ton of opportunities to add corrals off the sidewalk. So just for example, anywhere where we want to do a bulb out, and we find that for whatever reason we can't add a tree there, because it's like, there's like a major sewer line or something under the road. What we would probably want to do instead is take that bump out space, still use it as a bump out, but then instead of planting a tree there, use that as bike and scooter parking. I like to add those corrals in places where it's illegal to park when you approach an intersection. So it has this effect called daylighting. You daylight the intersection by preventing the car from being there and blocking the pedestrians who are waiting to cross the street. So you create more visibility for those pedestrians. So by placing those corrals at intersections, you actually enhance pedestrian safety, which I think is great, because it not only enhances pedestrian safety by making them more visible to cars, it enhances pedestrian safety by keeping those scooters off the sidewalk, where we know that they can cause problems. So I think there's a ton of opportunities here. I think it's going to really, those corrals, we can really kind of squeeze them in all over the place. So it's really just going to sort of depend on what the design team comes up with, I think, when they start doing like 30% and 60% design, and then we can sort of fit those in later when we've got gaps. So like in terms of like specific locations right now, I don't really have any specific locations for corrals. I think that if there are specific places where commissioners that you've noticed or your constituents have noticed, if there's areas where scooters tend to pile up, because I know that does happen for whatever reason, some block, there's a bunch of people there who love to scoot and the scooters are piling up all over the place. Like, that's a great thing to let me know about. And then we can look and try and provide that infrastructure there where it's most needed. So I guess to answer the question more succinctly, yes, we can definitely do corrals. Absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
Does DC, and I don't think it's us necessarily, but do those services provide incentives for users to perhaps reduce their travel fee, like take $1 off the trip or whatever it is if they put the bike back in the bike corral? I think that's how it works in Alexandria. And I based on my experience in Old Town, I've actually seen more of the vehicles ending up where they're designated to end up versus just willy-nilly. And I don't know if it doesn't happen here because it's just a different user group, or if it's because incentives aren't offered.
So it's a couple of different things, and this is an area where actually I could probably spend like the rest of our time talking about this, because this is something that I work on quite a bit. So I'll try and keep this brief. But not all of the scooter companies do that in the district. Some do. Off the top of my head, I think Spin does and Lyft does, and I don't think anybody else does right now. And what I mean by that, and what they do is they provide incentives in terms of a discount or a rebate for you to bring the scooter back to a specific area. It's something that Capital Bike Share does with the new Capital Bike Share e-bikes. If you lock them to a bike rack, you get charged an extra $1. If you take them back to the Capital Bike Share station, so they're nice and neat, you do not get charged an extra $1. And we found that with Capital Bike Share, it's like over 60% of people take it back to the station rather than using the bike rack. So that's actually been really impressive for us in terms of how powerful just a $1 is in terms of shaping people's behavior and where they're leaving stuff on the roadway. In terms of making that a requirement for the scooter companies, I think that's probably beyond. I shouldn't get into a whole tangent here on that, but yeah, we could be doing more in terms of providing incentives. I think that we're going to see a lot more tools coming out of the legislation that Councilmember Che has and her office has put together on this, including lock to, so that scooters are going to actually have to be locked to infrastructure which in turn, of course, places the burden on DDOT now to provide more of that infrastructure. So to be putting parking facilities out there for people to take advantage of. Because if we're going to say to people, well, you got to take the scooter to a specific place, then we're going to have to build those places, so they don't exist yet. So that is definitely something we're going to be looking at for this project. So hopefully I've been able to answer that question without just like totally rambling. Okay. Anything else?
We do have an additional question and comment in the Q&A. A concern I've had with the east side bike lane on Park is it requires bikers coming from neighborhood streets west of Park to cross into the traffic lane, then turn into the bike lane. What are you planning on doing to mitigate those risks? I know we've touched on this before.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And I think the first thing that we're going to do is reduce Park Place to a single travel lane. I think that that's going to have a huge impact in terms of the speed that people are going to be traveling, because again, the traffic calming effect of having a narrower road, as we've discussed. But yeah, no, I agree that those turns are something we're going to have to think about very hard. I've just like pulled the drawing over back to Park Place and Park Road. And what we've got right now in terms of drawings does not really address that question. I think there's a number of different treatments that can be done to the intersection. Everything to paint to more protective measures actually out in the intersection. There are protected intersection treatments that we can consider. We can consider traffic control devices, which is a technical term that I should not use in a meeting like this. Traffic control device being a stop sign or a stoplight. Stoplight's probably not going to happen. Stop signs, we've already discussed the one stop sign at this particular intersection, which I'll be taking back to the design team. Traffic control devices like a stop sign would, I think, make those turns much safer. So, it is a really good question. And basically the answer is there's a lot of different ways it can be done. And unfortunately, for the purposes of this conversation, I'm not able to really speculate accurately on like how exactly we're going to do it. But it is something that we are thinking about and realize is a serious concern here.
Thanks. And then I know we're going a little over on what I expected to be our time, so I did want to flag two things. We have our Ward 1 Bicycle Advisory Council representative asking a general question about maintenance and upkeep of leaves and snow on narrower lanes, how you expect that to be taken care of. And I also do want to make sure that we discuss next steps in the timeline for the next steps. I know we touched on that early on, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same page for that.
Absolutely. So I'll talk about the snow and street cleaning thing first. So in terms of street cleaning, DPW handles that, Department of Public Works. They're the same nice folks who pick up your trash and other essential services citywide. The most effective way, if you see an area where there's a bike lane that needs some attention because of like broken glass, debris, construction debris especially can be a problem during construction season. 311, they really do look at that stuff. Like we all really do look at that stuff. I'd say in general, anything, and I know sometimes it feels like futile, like you're always putting things into 311 and then things happen very slowly, but it is something that we really do pay attention to. And the other thing we really do pay attention to is getting yelled at on Twitter. So I encourage you to do that as well. So to answer your question, DPW will clean out the bike lanes if there are leaves, debris, other things. In terms of snow, that's me. Me sometimes. At DDOT, we are all on the snow team if the need arises. And we, even in the planning department, like us paper pushers, get trained on how to drive the big snow plows. They trained me on the snowplow last year, and then we got 0 inches of snow, and I was very disappointed. So hopefully we get more snow this year, and then I get to drive the snowplow around. And we got like a little one that fits in the bike lane. It's super cool, and I want a chance to drive it. So let's hope it comes up.
And I think I know the answer to this, but one question, are you planning for 2 protected bike lanes on Park Place, one on the east side, one on the west side, or just the one on the east side as shown in the cross section?
Yeah, just the one on the east side going southbound. So it's a single lane, one way, and then the complementary one on Warder, single lane going north the other way.
That's about all I'm seeing right now. Yeah, so would you touch on next steps?
Yeah, so obviously this has been a very preliminary conversation, but we've gotten a lot of great information here. I would really like to take this to the engineering folks, see what they think about it, come back and have a conversation with you all about, with more detail about like what's going to be feasible and what these trade-offs are. I've tried to like sort of frame this around trade-offs with this project, and I think now that we have a sense of what the community's priorities are, we can have that conversation in a lot more detail and say like, okay, like, we can do X number of trees versus X blocks of bike, whatever it works out to be when we talk to that team. I think that will probably happen, I'm going to guess, unfortunately with the holidays and everything, December's probably a little soon for us, but like January, if I could come back in January and talk to y'all some more then, I'm happy to do that in a public meeting. I'm happy to do it however you want. We could basically do this kind of thing again, though probably we would not need quite as much time. And then I would take that more fine-grained feedback, and we would then get to work on the designs. They tend to go 30%, 60% complete for whatever reason, or like 30%, 60%, 90%. So I would try and come back to you all with a 30% design, a couple of months after that. So then we're starting to look at, April, May, around there, and then we can start really kind of locking in the details. And like that's the point when we're going to start getting into like what are the specific intersection treatments, what are like the specific like, oh, the paint's going to go here versus there, the curb's going to go here versus like that level of detail. I hope I'm answering the question sufficiently.
Exactly, and I think that addresses a few other concerns and questions in here too. So we should expect to discuss specific intersections at the 30% design phase.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to throw out one question, although I don't know specifically which intersection it was referencing, but there was a question if tabletop condition would be an option for some of these intersections as well.
Oh, you mean like a raised intersection treatment? Ooh, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. And
this question was specifically to the Park Road, Park Place intersection.
Yeah. Okay, so that's like not a thing that we do a lot in DC, which means that I don't know a ton about those treatments. I kind of suspect that would get shot down here because of fire and emergency vehicle traffic, which is why those treatments. So, and I'm sorry for anybody who's trying to follow this. Like a raised intersection is where you literally, you take the place where pedestrians cross the street and you bring it up to the same level as the sidewalk, so you're not stepping down to the road. So it basically creates a giant speed bump for cars. Like it turns the intersection to a giant speed bump. It's cool. I can float that. My sense is they're going to be like, oh no. That's going to like wreck the suspension of every ambulance that's going to come speeding down the road, and send people flying out of the back of the ambulance or something. But I'm not sure. So that's something I can bring up.
Well, you know my philosophy, ask every question and then you'll come back with an answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, it's on my list.
Thank you. So that's all I have. I do want to point folks towards, I know I put this in the chat much earlier, but please reach out to us if you had questions that weren't fully answered. I know you can sign up for our newsletter on our ANC website, and there's a spot there to also join the transportation committee. Please do reach out to me if you have any issues with that. I'm happy to add you to our committee list. We're always looking for involved members and really appreciate your interest and your input and the hours and energy you put in. And a special thanks to all of our agency folks that joined today, Aaron and George and Syra and everyone else too. So if that's all we have, then I'm happy to end this and really looking forward to connecting in January virtually and hopefully soon in person.
Happy holidays.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, George.
Yep,
Really
you're welcome.
appreciate you tackling the questions. Thanks, everyone.